Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Finding Your First Job in Canada, and brought to you by TD. So setting up your life in a new country can be difficult. There are many steps you'll have to take, such as setting up your bank account, finding an apartment or house, and maybe the most important, finding your first job. And all of these things require research and preparation. Today, we'll take a deep dive into how to approach finding your first job in Canada. We're going to hear from our guest, Jennifer Amankwa, on what you can expect in the job search process and how to prepare yourself properly. Jennifer is a member of the Canadian Diversity Sourcing team at TD Bank. She leads the Visible Minority and Black Talent strategy. Her focus is to proactively source and advocate for talent from these backgrounds. She moved to Toronto from London, UK in 2017. Her first role in Canada was working for Access Employment. Her role involved working with newcomers and helping them with employment opportunities. She started working with TD in 2019. And prior to life in Toronto, Jennifer worked in the UK in various human resource roles. Jennifer has 10 years of experience working in the UK. She has a master's in human resources management and her first degree is in English. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we're going to appreciate your expertise on this important part of people's journeys to Canada. Jennifer will present for about 30 minutes, after which we'll have a Q&A session where we're going to select questions from chat. So throughout Jennifer's presentation, if anything comes to your mind, make sure you pop your question into chat and we'll try to get to it at the end of this webinar. But also bear in mind that the chat is public, so please don't share any personal information, such as your phone number or email in the chat. These messages will be removed. Again, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to get to as many of them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer to get the presentation started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So hello, everybody. Thank you for that amazing introduction as well. I'm here to talk to you about finding your first job in Canada. So you've heard my bio, a little bit about me. I am also a newcomer. I'm an immigrant. I moved here about 6 years ago now. So I understand what it's like to look for a new job as a newcomer. So I'm hoping that today my session will give you some tips and some tricks and hopefully some encouragement too. So let's get started. What am I going to talk about today? So my agenda includes research and networking. I'll also talk to you about your resume and social media, in particular LinkedIn, virtual interviewing, and lastly, I'll finish off by how to build your brand. So research and networking. It's important that you lay the groundwork, you network, and you also stay motivated. So let me go into each of those by detail. So laying the groundwork. When I moved to Canada, one thing that I made very clear to myself is that I had to research what it was like to work here, to look for jobs here, what type of companies existed here. How I did that. I think it's really important for people to look for formal groups, right? So by that, I mean going on to things such as meetup.com, looking at groups, looking at your social circle as well. When you do move here, you never know. You may know someone that's moved here before. You may have some alumni from school. You may have friends. You may have community partners. Look at your social circle and see what network opportunities that you have. One thing that really helped me when I moved was looking at immigration serving organization. So I'm really happy that you're part of this webinar today with CanadaVisa, but there are others out there such as Access Employment, Jumpstart. Those are things I can think, and Achev is another good one. So these organizations are here to help you in terms of your job search and just you starting your life generally in Canada. I would also say it's important for you to stay relevant and also set your expectations. I know how it is. I understand. When I moved, I had this instant, I just really wanted to start working ASAP, but I wanted to make sure that I gave myself enough time to research the market and have a look at what was going out there. I'd also say events and networking is very important. I'll talk about networking a bit later on, but targeting networking events that are relevant to your industry, to your interest, and also connecting with people in those spaces. When you are starting to look for jobs, make sure your LinkedIn is up to date and detailed. Your picture, your summary, what kind of jobs you were doing. Again, I'll talk about that later on. And I'd say working on your elevator pitch. So for those who don't know what an elevator pitch is, I'm sure most of you do, but imagine that you're in the elevator with someone, let's say, I don't know, CEO of, let's say, TD. What are you going to say? What's your 3-minute pitch that introduces who you are, what you do, what you're about, and what you're interested in? So it's important for you to start with those in mind before you start looking for your roles. Networking. What is networking? I know we all know what it is, but it happens when you're meeting people. It depends on what kind of space. You're meeting in a professional setting, in a personal setting. You're meeting people who could potentially have an interest in you and vice versa. I didn't know that it was important before I moved to Canada. I think I'm from the UK, and yes, we do have lots of networking events there for sure, but I would say I had to do it more here. It's important because it helps you build a strategy. It helps you build something for your career. It helps you build a network, and also gives you vital information about what you're looking for. Some things that might not be on the website of the company may be something you discover via talking to someone. So you can meet people across the organization, different rules that can advance your enhancement, finding out about people's backgrounds, how they got to where they got to, and something that you may want to know. So you've done your networking, you've gotten that meeting. And in terms of networking, what I would say is for you, especially if you're abroad, LinkedIn is going to be your best friend. LinkedIn and also online virtues such as this. Now you've been able to meet up with someone, talk to someone. I think it's important to also realize that I know it's something that's very different to do. When I moved here, I found it quite difficult to reach out to somebody randomly in my industry. And I know it's hard because not everybody gets back to you. But it did help me. I remember when I came here, I reached out to a few human resource professionals. Some got back to me, some didn't. When I did get that meeting, what was I going to talk about? I had to think about that. So you've done your networking, you've met with someone via a LinkedIn group or via a personal connection. What are you going to do? Number one, I'd say is prepare for this meeting. Like I said, you don't want to go into the meeting not knowing what to say. And you also want to make sure that you are getting the most out of that person when you are speaking to that person. So prepare. What kind of questions do you want to ask? Let's say, for example, are you a project management professional? And do you want to learn about what type of qualifications or what type of industries to target? Have your questions laid out so that you have time to ask the person. I would say most people meet between 30 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on the person's day. So you don't want that time to go to waste. So be prepared. Also on that, work on your elevator pitch. So when the person asks you about yourself, you know exactly what you're going to say. And then, like I said, have your questions ready so that you're able to find out the information that you need to. Staying relevant is important. And I'd say this because if you're in an industry, for example, let's say finance, what's happening in the finance world? Or you want to be specific, what's happening in accountancy, let's say randomly. Are you up to date? Are you able to share some knowledge with that person? Because yes, you're meeting with the person, you're getting information from them, but they can also learn from you. And if they do learn from you, that could be something that helps you stay relevant in the person's mind, especially when potential opportunities come up. So when I moved to Canada, it wasn't the COVID period. This is when people were meeting in person. So you would ask for a coffee chat, sit down with the person and have a 30-minute conversation. Now, thank goodness for technology, we can do this virtually. Zoom chats, team meetings. Again, rather than saying, hey, can we meet in person? I think give the person the option. I'd love it if we could have a coffee chat. I'm open to being in person or I'm open to meeting in a virtual world as well. I mean, online too, sorry. Staying authentic. So I understand these situations can be quite nerve-wracking and I understand that, you know, you want to put your best foot forward, but the person wants to also see who you are. So be authentic. Tell them about your day. Ask them questions about themselves. Be who you are. So staying motivating, I think is very important because when we're out there, especially we're in the virtual world, we're messaging people on LinkedIn, we're on Zoom, it's important to, like I said before, set our expectations. Not everybody is going to get back to you. LinkedIn is a great tool, but it's also a tool where there are so many people. If you're targeting people such as, let's say, senior talent, senior people, recruiters, etc., they are being inundated with messages. So be patient. Manage your expectations so that you're not too disappointed if someone doesn't get back to you. I remember when I moved here, I had so many messages sent out. Not everyone did get back to me. I would say taking breaks is important because sometimes it's common to get inundated in your virtual world and wanting to find a job. And I understand that, but sometimes taking a step back so that you're not engrossed in it is good for your mental health too. I would also say volunteering, whether you're back home, whether you're in Canada already, getting involved with an organization that is in line with what you're looking for, your morals, your values, but also maybe some of the skills that you have, you may be able to use it when you're volunteering. So your online personal brand, what is it and how do you create it on LinkedIn? So when I started off the presentation, I mentioned, make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. So I did this presentation a couple of years ago, and me and my team looked at this task. What are our personal brands and how would you describe yourself? So for me, I said my 3 words were committed, I'm very approachable, and I'm also a storyteller. My other colleagues spoke about being the fact that they are organized or that they are forward thinking or that they have great strategic skills. Whatever you have to describe yourself, try and incorporate it somewhere on your profile on LinkedIn. So, like I said, if you look at my LinkedIn, I would have used some of them. If I haven't used them all, then that's fine as well. But I have told a story about myself in general, about who I am in terms of my career. The About Me section is your snapshot of what it is that you are. Not too long. You want to have a few words that when a recruiter is looking at your LinkedIn profile, they know who you are and they know what you're about. So, have you worked on any projects that have some great milestones? Do you have any strengths that you want to talk about? Is there anything that you're working on that is quite public? Do you have any articles, etc.? Put that all on your LinkedIn. Don't go into too much detail because recruiters, yes, they will look at your profile, but they will also look at your resume. Remember that your LinkedIn profile is just a snapshot of your resume. So I've given you some few best practices, when it comes to LinkedIn. I would say, number 1, avoid adding designations to your name. I understand that a lot of people are very educated, master's, PhD. There's an education section that you can put that there. Just have your name clear so that it's just simple to look at. Make sure that you use a current photo that is professional and also welcoming. I would say that you put your current role in your headline or what you're looking for and get creative. Have an engaging headline. One of the most important ones, or one of the most engaging ones I have seen was someone who was working in partnerships. And they spoke about having great stakeholder management, partnering with companies and looking to transfer their skills into a different organization. It was just very to the point and very precise. Customize your LinkedIn URL. So you can do that. There's a lot of different things you can Google online where you can just customize it. Because when you're pasting your LinkedIn profile onto your resume, you don't want it to be too long. You just want it to be just make your resume look as presentable as possible. You can also add a banner if you want. I've seen some great ones of the Toronto skyline, buildings in Dubai, buildings in London, whatever that is that you are interested in or what you like, you can put it there. It's also good to have a plain one as well. Make sure you turn your summary into a professional story. And it's what I mentioned before about the About Me section. Who are you? What are you looking for? What are your skills and your experiences? Are you engaging? Have you captivated the attention of your recruiter or your hiring manager? Optimize your location. So if you are coming to Canada, if you are in Toronto, you're in Vancouver, you're in Ottawa, make sure that you put those locations there, because another thing when recruiters are looking, they do want to see where you are. And build your network. Connect with people who are in your network from the past. So that could be your schools, your network, your mosque, your church, your community organization, your country, let's say Nigerian professionals of, project management randomly. There's so many amazing groups out there, and I found it really helpful when I was looking. So building your network. I mentioned stay optimistic because there are so many setbacks when people aren't getting back to you, when people aren't helping you. I understand. Some people do take time. Just remember that, not everyone will get back to you. Not everyone is obliged to. Some people will help you some way. I'm trying to reiterate that point because there are a lot of disappointments that come when you're trying to connect with people online. Follow up, but don't follow up too much. I would say maybe 2 times, but you don't want to bombard the person. If they haven't responded, then it's fine. You can move on to someone else in the industry. I would also say when you're reaching out to people in the team, try and connect with people who are beyond the hiring manager or the recruiter. So, for example, I'm a marketing professional. It would be great if I can connect with my peers rather than going for the recruiter or the hiring manager. They may be more open, they may have more time. The hiring manager already has been bombarded, as well as a recruiter. But be proactive about who you're looking to connect with. Your peers are a good start. Okay, so we've spoken about LinkedIn. Now we're at the resume. So these are some points that I thought would be good to share with you. But I do want to say that lots of people have different opinions. Lots of recruiters have different opinions, as do people from different institutions, even within the institution. But some things that have stood out to me as I've worked, not only for TD, but in my previous careers, are these points. So number one, a clean layout and an easy to read resume. So with this, I'm talking about your spacing. I'm talking about the amount on the page. I'm talking about how you have designed it, something that is clean and easy to read. We're seeing thousands of resumes, so we want to make sure that we are engaged in your resume as soon as we see it. I know this is debatable. I would say 2 pages max. Make sure that you are highlighting your skills. You have a good summary outlining who you are and what you're looking for. I think one thing that it can be quite hard is to understand the person's background if they haven't been clear. When I have to guess or have to look and I'm not really sure, then that's making extra work for your recruiter. So be as clear as possible. I would also say think specifically about your job that you're applying for. So one thing I used to do, or I'd even do to this day, is encourage candidates to make sure that they target their resumes. So I understand it's a tedious and annoying task, but if you're going for, let's say, a human resources role, but then you're also interested in a business analyst role, target the resume accordingly. Rather than sending a blanket resume to all of these different roles now, make sure that you are pointing out things that the job description has asked for. So when that you're being screened and you're looked at, the recruiter can see that, okay, this person has these skills. I would say also avoid your spelling and grammatical errors. I know all of you know this, but it's very common to see mistakes. So really look at your resume with a fine tooth, really scrutinize it. Take away your irrelevant or outdated experience. So I think this is an important one. So for me, for example, I've been working for 10 plus years. To avoid my resume being too long, I've taken out some of my earlier roles, or I've just put a line, like the job title and the company, rather than going into the details of what that role entailed. Because I've worked at quite a few different companies now, I want to kind of keep things very concise. I would say people who are students, for example, then I understand your work experience may be less and you may have focused on your educational achievements, that's fine. But look at where you are in your career and make sure that your resume, is not outdated. I would also say that you make an effort to state your most important points first and include big achievements. So going on to my next point, quantify. Have you reduced turnover by 50%? Have you increased profit? Have you opened up a new business area? All of that should be on the first few points of your resume in that job, whatever job that you've done. If you've done it at a few jobs, then make sure it's at the top. Put your credentials there, so your education credentials, if you've done your master's, if you've done any kind of certifications, if you have done any articles or any training, just make sure it's relevant to the role that you're applying for so that you don't have a long list of irrelevant things. So when I did this presentation a couple of years ago, me and 2 of my recruiter colleagues, we spoke about things that were quite annoying. So pet peeves, things that are annoying when you see on resumes. So for me, what I said was, when someone sends me a resume, make it clear who you are. Sometimes people will just have an email and just say resume. They will save their resume as resume. Because I'm dealing with thousands of resumes, it'll be helpful if you have your name, then the resume. Because when I'm sending off your resume to recruiters or to hiring managers, I don't have to do too much saving and changing, etc. So my colleagues, I remember what they said was, even if you contact them and you get their name wrong, you spell their name wrong, that's irritating. Or if you have a resume and it's not very specific about what you have done, or you've missed certain things, or we go on your LinkedIn and we see that's different to what you've done in your resume, it doesn't make sense. Those are things that that can be quite pet peevey, I'd say. But yeah, as I said, everyone has their own opinions. Recruiters are different, even within institutions, but these are things that I have noticed and I'm sharing with you. So virtual interviews, obviously COVID has changed things. So with TD, what you will see now is when we do our interviews, the first screening, it's mostly a telephone call or it could be a Zoom interview. So I know this is a definition. I know everyone knows what a virtual interview is, so I'm not going to go through that. but just be prepared to have both. There may be virtual or there may be a chance for you to come in. So you've done your networking, you've got a great resume, you've been able to secure an interview. What next? I put it into 3 different points: making sure you prepare, making sure you deliver, and then lastly, following up. So prepare. When you're preparing for your interview, have you researched the company? And I don't mean TD is one of the biggest banks in Canada. No. What is TD doing? Have you looked at things they're doing in community? So for example, one thing I can tell you on the top of my head, because I work in diversity and inclusion, is TD is very big on diversity. If you go onto the website, you'll see a lot of different initiatives they're working on. We're also big on environment. You'll see things that's helping socially. Making sure that you have just taken some time to get to know the company, but not just for the typical credentials. I would say following TD on LinkedIn or any other company you're applying for, follow them on LinkedIn because they'll always post about what they're doing. So obviously you're going to be prepared to speak to your background and experiences. I know this is an obvious statement to make, but I think what can happen sometimes is you're in interviewing situations and then you don't tell your story as well as you want to. So yes, the person will ask you, so tell me about yourself. Have you figured out an answer that really exposes everything about you in terms of your career? You don't want to miss anything. So making sure that you really are preparing your answers and your background so you don't miss things. If, for example, you're going for a marketing position and the position requires you to create a marketing campaign for new soap, if you've done that in a previous role, make sure that you mention that, okay? Just make it very relevant to what the role is you're going for. You don't want to go through everything in case there are things that are irrelevant, but you do want to make sure that you are speaking to your background so that the recruiter remembers and matches you with what that job is asking for. So prepare a list of questions. So you always get asked that question at the end of the interview. Do you have any questions for us? Always have a question to ask and make sure the question is also quite relevant. So one question that I like to use when I'm interviewing is, so do you like working for this company? Can you tell me some of your highlights? Can you tell me what the culture is like? Something specific to the role as well. Let's say you've really looked at the job description and you've picked out something. You can ask that hiring manager, oh, hi, I noticed that you need, that I'll be working on X project. How's the project going so far? Something that shows that you have really engaged with what it is that you want to know. And second to last, I'd say practicing at home. Even me, working in HR for all these years in recruitment, I still need to go over and practice things. I need to make sure that my pace is okay, that I'm making sure that I have done a good job of explaining my background so I don't miss anything, that I'm not too nervous because we all get nervous in these situations. And lastly, dress well. I'm sure you all know how to dress well for an interview. Business casual is what I'd always say. In Canada, I'd also say beware of this because this happened to me. I went to an interview in person during the winter. Here, it snows a lot when it gets to December, November. I remember having my winter boots. I made sure I went early so I could change into my more comfortable interview attire. I think I was wearing black heels. So giving myself enough time because sometimes, you'll come from a snowstorm. You're in the interview room and you haven't really taken time to dress. But they understand. It is understanding, but just not to kind of overwhelm yourself because for me, that overwhelmed me. I didn't really know how I was going to navigate that, but I'm happy I gave myself some more time. Okay, so if you're doing a virtual interview, keep your background clean and tidy. So you might want to blur your background. You might want to have a white background. One thing is you want to keep the attention of the person. You don't want them to look at what's going on behind you so they're not listening to your answer when you're answering your question. I would also say limit distractions. So I know we live with our families, children, pets, roommates. Let them know that you're having an interview so that you are fully focused. But at the same time, there are so many things that happen sometimes when we're doing virtual things. So we do understand as well. But just so that you are, okay within yourself before you do your interview, try and limit it. But it's understanding if, your child comes or your dog starts barking, etc. It's okay. So build rapport with your interviewer. Ask the person, how are they? How has your day been? It's an interview, yes, and it's a professional environment, yes, but at the same time, you're talking to a person, right? So try and build that rapport with the person. Try and build, be who you are, your authentic self, but at the same time, building something so that the conversation isn't so rigid. I would say avoid your common mistakes. So getting there on time. I would say also making sure that you know that you've prepared for that job. There's been so many incidents I have seen where the person's going for a different job, or they call the interviewer's name wrong, etc. So I'd say make sure that you avoid those things. And then make your career objectives clear. So that question, why are you applying for this role? Because I'm looking to gain experience in human resources management. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'd really like to develop within X career. Make sure that it is clear so the person interviewing understands and knows what you're looking for. So following up, one thing I didn't do when I moved to Canada is I had my interview and I just waited for the answer. After you have your interview, send an email thanking the hiring manager for their time. Keep it really short and sweet. It doesn't need to be a long email. If there's anything you've missed in your interview that you want to say, I would use that opportunity to write it there, but nothing too long. And then also, you can also mention something that you learned about the organization. So really great to meet with you. Thank you for your time today. One thing I learned through our conversation was that this project is really exciting and you're going to be using X system, and I'm really excited about that. That's it. Looking forward to hearing from you soon, and send a thank you. Now, if you don't hear back, I would say follow up again. Probably once or twice. That's what I would say. Don't be discouraged though. If you don't hear, a good company should respond to you, but sometimes that's not always the case, which is unfortunate, but that's why I said before about talking about our expectations and setting them. It's okay if you don't hear back, it's on to the next one. But if you had the interview, do ask, follow up. And also, if you get the role, fantastic. Thank you for your email. Thank you, take the position, etc. If that's what you want. If not, I would say ask for feedback. Sometimes you are able to get that so that you can work on your next steps. Like, why is it that you didn't get the role? What could you work on, etc. And similar to you not hearing back, sometimes recruiters are able to provide you with that feedback, but sometimes they're not able to. So just don't be discouraged. Keep the process. And just remember that, everyone has had to go through this experience, but, things will work out. So I've whizzed through. I think I'm way below 30 minutes and I'm ready for questions.
Awesome. I guess first things first, thank you so much, Jennifer, for the detailed presentation. Yeah, we really appreciate your time and going through all those details. We got some good questions that came in mostly by email, and then also some that came in by chat. And we're, once again, thankful and excited for the Q&A portion. To start off this, we got a couple questions about whether this presentation is recorded, whether the slides will be available, etc. So yes, in 24 hours after this webinar, you'll receive in your inbox an email, a follow-up email with the slides and also a link to the webinar recording. So if there's sections of the webinar you want to spend more time going through and taking more detailed notes, you'll have that recording to go through later. Awesome. So to start off the Q&A portion, and a quick reminder, we're still taking questions. So if you have additional questions you want answered that come up during the Q&A process, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to those questions as well. Great. So Ben asks, can you explain more about the implications of putting or not putting your designations with your name on LinkedIn and what effect that can have on you?
Yeah, I think you just want to keep it really simple, to be honest, because the person is already going to have a look at your education. So I would say it's just in terms of the aesthetic, make it simple, right? You just, especially when someone is also searching your name in maybe one of the ATSs, I would say, just have your name there. Don't worry, we will check your education.
Right. And how important, I guess, is that first look at the resume? Are employers getting a lot of applicants and have to skim through it?
Yeah, loads. If you applied for a job at TD, we have thousands of applicants for sure. So I would say that's why I was very kind of adamant about your resume being not too crowded, not too many words, some white space. You've taken time to redesign it well. So yeah, it's very important.
Amazing. Great. A question came in here. Are there any cultural or linguistic barriers that I should be aware of when applying for jobs?
Sure. I'll talk about it from my experience because I'm also an immigrant. I came from the UK, as you mentioned. One thing I got when I was interviewing was my pace of speaking. First of all, I have an accent, right? So it's different to what's here. Obviously, there's lots of different accents here, which is fine. But I did talk very fast. So I would say, make sure you slow down when you're speaking. I got that comment quite a few times. So I would say to my fellow immigrants who are moving, slow down, breathe, take some time before you answer. And also, ask, if you don't understand, also repeat the question. Ask them to repeat the question likewise. So I would say your pace, especially if you have an accent like me.
I think that's advice that I could use too. I've been told that I speak pretty fast.
Really?
Yeah. Elizabeth asks if you can touch on maybe some places or websites to look for as an immigrant in Canada.
Yeah, sure. No problem. LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn for roles because I follow when I moved here, I followed all the companies that I wanted to work at. So I said use that. I'd say Indeed is a good one. I would say also, there's one more I'm thinking of. Damn, I've forgotten about it. I think Glassdoor, from what I remember, they have a job section. I like Glassdoor because you can look at the comments on the company, basically. They will basically talk about an overview, and they'll also, employees will talk about it as well. And I think that they have a job section. I remember, well, when I was looking, they did have that. But my favorite, hands down, is LinkedIn.
Right. We've got a question here about resume format and industry-specific resume formats. Yep. If you're switching careers, are there such thing as like industry-specific resume formats? And if I'm switching careers, how should I go about changing the format of my resume?
Industry-specific. I don't think I can comment on that. I don't really know much of those different industries, but I can talk about career changes. What you need to do if you are going into a different career, hone in on your transferable skills. So let's say, for example, I'm a human resources professional and I want to get into business analysis. I would pick up on those projects that I worked on during my career that I had to incorporate some of those skills from that new role that I want to get to. So, and I'd also make it really clear on my profile. So the front section, there's normally a profile that you can put. A lot of people like to do that. I would make it clear that, hey, I'm a human resources professional looking to transition into business analysis. And then those transferable skills, really, really hone in on that.
Great. How do I evaluate job offers and negotiate salaries and benefits?
Glassdoor, I really like Glassdoor because I think people are quite open about, their salaries. When you look for a role and you look for the salary, I think it gives you a good range. If you want to negotiate, I always say this is what I did when I was looking for roles. When I've gone through the interview and I've been offered the role, I would say, thank you very much. I'm really excited to start in this role. However, I was looking at, my salary expectations, and I've done some research, and your research could be Glassdoor, you've spoken to friends, you've used LinkedIn, and you found a higher range. And I noticed that it'd be really great if I could get $10,000 more, or I'm looking for some more annual leave because I'm a family person. I would say it like that. But first, establish that you're excited about the role, and then put your proposal there. That's what I would do.
Great. A couple of questions here about how you're evaluated as a candidate in terms of whether you have permanent residence or you're on some sort of temporary status. Does that matter when I'm applying for a job?
So I'll talk about TD. They will definitely ask you. They will say one of the first things they'll say is, I don't know, your background, your experience, etc. But they'll say, what's your legal status in Canada? So if you're on a work permit, they will ask you more about that. If you're permanent resident, etc. I would say this. I'll talk about it from my experience. I came here on an open work permit, 2-year work permit, and I was able to get a job. I was. After that, I was a permanent resident, still able to get a job, and now I'm a Canadian citizen. You will be asked for sure, but I would say just be honest about your journey. Yep, I'm on a work permit. If you're planning to stay here, talk about the fact that you're applying for your residency. Just be honest about your journey. But yeah, they definitely will ask you. I don't think it will limit, though. Depending on the employer. Some companies, yes, they may be a bit narrow-minded and, we're not sure, but some are open. So I'd say at TD, we have so many newcomers. There's so many, they hired me on a work permit. I'd say that for sure. So, yeah.
Great. Will I always hear back from an employer if I'm rejected?
No, unfortunately not. It's really unfortunate because I wish that I think I mentioned it in my presentation in terms of like not getting discouraged, but sometimes they don't respond to you. I think a good company, they should get back to you and give you some feedback, but sometimes the volume is so high. So like I said, what you should do is follow up once or twice. If you haven't heard, then you move on. But yeah, unfortunately not everyone will, but hopefully they should. Fingers crossed.
And is there a rule of thumb for how often you should follow up, or the time in which you follow up?
I would do it once or twice, and I would do it like weekly. I'm just thinking about, let's say, when someone has contacted me about a job, and if it's too much, I'm thinking, wow, okay, I'm going to get back to you. So I would say, yeah, twice, and maybe the first week, and then the second week, and then leave it.
Right. Preeti asks, could you please repeat some of the networking sites that you mentioned in the beginning of the session?
Networking. Okay, so I used meetups.com. I also, what I did, depending on your industry, I would also look at, there's a lot of networking events around that. So for example, if you're in project management, there's a project management institute. If you're in HR, you've got the HRPA. I would say I went on Eventbrite and I looked for networking sessions there. What else did I look at? I also looked at my community. So if you're, let's say, for example, I'll talk about a community partner I know because we work with them at TD, Ascend. Ascend is for Asian professionals, just Asian professionals in general. So they have meetings all the time. So this is like East Asian, South Asian. TD sponsors them. So they'll always do events with them. So look at your communities that you're from. Sometimes they have events going on.
Great. Some questions here from international students that came in. First question is, how should I approach summer internships as an international student?
Yeah, just go for it. Honestly, we have our internships at TD. Like I said, they will ask you about your work permit, when you're expiring, etc. But apply as a Canadian would apply. We've hired quite a few international students for our internship programs. So yeah, just go for it.
Right. And are there some specific places international students can go to network or source for job applications?
I could talk about TD. So we do have a early talent section on our website. So go there. Oh, one thing I missed mentioning as well, just regarding your previous question, make sure that you can work, because I think there's some restrictions in terms of the hours that you can work. So look at what's going on. But yeah, most of our students have been working. So I'd say look at our website. And I would also say, if you're in a university, they sometimes do a lot of different, let's say, networking events. To give you an example, I was recently at McMaster University. I was with their Black Students Organization, and they had an event specifically for networking with employers. So all your student bodies within universities, they should be doing something. I would also say, depending on your area, so for example, let's say you're in a law society, sometimes they also do have a student body as well.
Great. How many jobs should I expect to apply before, one, getting an interview, and two, getting an offer?
My goodness. That is the $1 million question. I don't think there's a number, honestly. I feel like it depends, because there are some companies that need someone straight away. So I can talk about, let's say for me, I had applied to, so many before I got my first job. But then I know someone who applied to one job and got their job. So it really depends. I don't think you should kind of quantify it. Just kind of focus on you, apply. I don't think just wait, it has to be a certain number before you get a job. No, it really depends.
Amazing. Lilia asks in chat, is it a good idea to mention my status or that I have an open work permit in my cover letter when I apply for jobs?
I would leave it off. Yeah. No, I wouldn't put it there. They will ask you when you're interviewed. So yeah, just focus on your skills and your experience.
Great. What do employers look for more when hiring in Canada? 1, skills, 2, degree, or 3, experience?
It depends on the role. And I would say everything. So for example, let's say some of our business analyst roles, it doesn't specify education, but it will ask you about, what you have done in the past. Skills is always important. Experience is not always important depending on the role. So I think, it's quite general, really. I don't think there's a rule to it, depending on the role. If you're applying for some of our technology roles, then yeah, they want you to have X, Y, and Z this degree, or maybe usage of some programs. But that might not be the same for some of our marketing or business analyst roles. So yeah, it depends.
Right. Does work experience from your home country matter when applying for jobs in Canada?
100%, for sure. At the end of the day, you're coming into, Canada, you're coming in with your work experience from back home. And that work experience is great. Put it there. Again, we're talking about transferable skills, the fact that you have worked. So yes, put your jobs there for sure.
Amazing. There's a question here about questions to ask during the interview process. How should someone go about that?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned, I'm saying, make sure that the question is relevant to what you're looking for. So for example, you don't want that general question. I think if it was me, I would say, let's say in the job description, it mentions that you need to have experience using Tableau. I would ask the question. So I noticed that you're looking for Tableau in these in this role. Can you tell me what I'll be using it for? What kind of projects are you working for? It just shows that you have taken some time to look at the job description and you've asked what's relevant. I'd also say questions about even the person. And what do you like about working for TD? Asking them and kind of you interviewing them as well. Because yes, you're having an interview, but you also want to know the company you're going into is a good one. When can I hear from you? So that you understand, you set that kind of, I want to hear back. When can I expect? What's the expectation? I'll ask that question as well.
Great. Question here about being hired before landing as an immigrant. When should people start the job application process in their journey?
It's a hard one because I'd say for TD, a lot of times we want you to be in country before we hire you, right? So that could be quite difficult. But I would also say that there are lots of open companies out there as well. Companies. If it was me, especially if you're working for a remote role and they're open to you being abroad, I'd start as soon as possible. I would. But then when it's like, company like TD, you need to be here, I'd say maybe a month before, 2 months before, when you're coming. So for example, you've got your permanent residency, you've got your work permit, I'm landing in Canada at this date, then yeah, more closer to the time. But yeah, there are companies out there that are more open. TD, you need to be here. So yeah.
Does having a Canadian degree and education increase your chances of getting a job in Canada?
Well, I don't have a Canadian degree or any education, and I'm working. So I would say I don't think so. But listen, I know some people are really bent up on that. I do understand that some people are, but I wouldn't say it's the be all and end all. My degree is from the UK, so yeah. And we've hired many newcomers from many different countries around the world who have not got Canadian education.
Right. What is appropriate interview attire?
I'd say smart business casual. So just be presentable. But depending on the company you're working for, if you're going to work for maybe tech firms, they may be a bit more laid back. But I would always stick to the status quo. So business casual. Shirts or a dress or a blazer, pants, etc. That's what I would do.
Great. A question here about continued education. How important is having, done courses or certifications in the job application process?
I think it depends on the role you're going for. So, for example, one of our roles is a financial planner, or if you're working in like our branch managers, right? You do need to have education. So we talk about IFIC, right? That's the investment funds in Canada, or CSE, which is Canadian Securities Course. You need to do that to work at a financial planner level. So depending on what job you're going for, whereas there's some jobs that you don't need it, but you might want to continue for yourself, I'd say. So really look at what the job is that you're going for. If you need to continue developing and learning and growing in that, then fine. Then if not, then yeah, I wouldn't say it's a must that you continue, but a lot of people do, and that's fine. But yeah, depends on the role.
Right. What do you see as some of the common challenges or pitfalls that newcomers encounter when they're searching for employment in Canada?
It's a really good question because I've been there. I think one of the common things is probably relying online too much. I think getting out there, application is fine, yes, but I think you definitely need to network a bit more, whether that's virtual or in person. I think it's important for you to get to know people, because I think there's a lot of referrals. People will talk to you and see that you've got a skill. I think that is important. So if you're on your computer all the time applying, I think you need to do a bit more than that, I'd say. And secondly, I think, a lot of us, when we're going through this, quite discouraging, especially when we haven't heard back. And I think sometimes, when you're going to these places, you're discouraged, then that can be quite hard as well. So I think, more optimism, giving yourself chances, giving yourself grace and allowance too. That's what I would say the things that stood out to me.
Right. This might be a difficult question to answer, but I'm curious in it. How can I stand out in my application as a newcomer?
How can you stand out as a newcomer? I think everything I have said in this presentation. So you have a strong resume, you have a strong cover letter if it's needed. You have gone the extra mile and trying to connect with someone on that team or in that industry. Networking is going to help you more. I really would say that. So you've got your resume, it's strong. I've taught you how to do that. Now it's networking. I would say do that.
Great. And if I'm in an international student, do companies offer co-op jobs?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, we do at TD. We do. Yeah, you just need to look at your work permit, because you're allowed to work certain hours, or you can work for depending on what it is it says. But yeah, we have hired international students on co-ops for sure. Yeah.
Great.
With that, I think to add to that, I would just say, sorry to interrupt you. I would just say, when it comes to your references, because we'll be asked for your reference checks, and that can take a long time. So just have that quickly, have that in check, because when you're international, same happened with me. My reference checks take a little bit longer. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess a follow-up question on that. If references are in a different time zone, or it's difficult to connect references with employers, how should I approach that as a newcomer if my references are abroad?
I would give the reference details sooner rather than later. As soon as you hear that you've gotten the role, straight away, when they're asking you for things, straight away. They understand, like I said, because TD hires international people all the time, they do understand that, but just be quick. And I'd also say the people that you're putting down to do your references, give them a nudge as well. So, yeah.
Right. A question here about getting the process started. If you're just starting off looking for job opportunities in Canada, what I guess are the first things I should do to start the process?
Okay. The first thing I would do is, what kind of company do you want to work for? Have you done that research? So if you know you want to stay in the financial industry, what are the top 5 banks or let's say consultancy firms, etc., then I would research that. I'd look at that. What I did, I looked at top 100 companies to work in Canada, great place to work. Those awards that you see in, I think, most countries, I looked at that. I kind of went through all the companies and then picked the industry depending. Because I'm quite general, HR, you can work anywhere, but I didn't know what I was interested in. So yeah, I liked using those awards to help me see what was happening in Canada. So yeah, top 100 best to work in Canada, top for diversity, what else there is, great place to work, all of them. I looked at them and I had a look at what companies were there.
Right. So you started with a company and then moved on to the role.
Yes, I did that. Yeah, I did that. But because I didn't know about what was in Canada. I mean, I knew obviously the international companies, but let's say, for example, TD, we don't have a massive presence in the UK. I didn't know about that. But when I went on to top 100 companies, TD was up there. So yeah, or use LinkedIn as well, top 100 LinkedIn companies. I know about all these awards because TD has won quite a few. So yeah.
Amazing. And then you found roles that were related to human resources and approached it that way.
I did. I just literally trailed on their website and their LinkedIn pages. That's when I was able to see the roles, who worked there, etc. So yeah, that's what I did.
Amazing. In terms of searching for jobs, like you said, some people on visas will have requirements where they can only work a certain amount of numbers per week.
Yep.
So people that are looking for part-time jobs, do you approach that differently than looking for full-time employment?
No, the same. So at TD, most of our part-time jobs are in the branches. So our TD branches, same, you apply, you get your hours per week, depending on your visa, etc. So yeah, it's the same process.
Same process. Awesome. Are there any, you touched upon some settlement organizations that can help with the process, but maybe you can go into a bit more detail on government programs or those resources available to help newcomers with employment?
Sure, I'll mention the ones I work with a lot, just because we've got like a relationship with them, and I found them quite helpful. Access Employment, I think they're really good. JVS as well. Um, Jumpstart, if you're a refugee, I'd say Jumpstart looks at refugee talent. They're quite good as well. And Achev, ACHEV. So those are the ones that come to the top of my head first.
Right. And are those resources generally free or?
Depending on what you want. Some of them are free, but some of them aren't. So, for example, Access, they do have one where it's free. That's Employment Ontario focused. But let's say you want to know, you do like, they have bridging programs there, right? So a bridging program is a program where you've got experience in finance from back home, but you don't have it in Canada. You do a program to help you get, a claim to that. I think there's a charge for that, I think. But yeah, but a lot of them are free though, I think.
Amazing. Is there an expectation during the interview process to keep your camera on, or how will I know about that? I guess. Yeah.
I don't think there's a written rule, but I would put my camera on just because it's an interview. Just imagine you're going in person. It's the same, really. So I would definitely put my camera on, unless you have a reason. You explain to the recruiter beforehand. Maybe it could be medical, or maybe it could be something else, and maybe explain. But I would put it on if you can.
Right. Amazing. And a common question we get is around Canadian work experience and people feeling like they need to compensate for it. What should I highlight in my resume and during the interview process to maybe qualm some of those fears? Yeah.
Sure. I think it's really important to highlight that you're coming with some great international experiences, right? From companies that may not be doing things that you're doing that you did there back home in Canada. So I think telling the story in that way, yes, I don't have Canadian experience, but I have some great international experience. I've worked on X, Y, and Z, and I'm an asset to your company because I'm coming with a different different mindset, a broader mindset, because I've been abroad. So I think I do understand that, yes, there are some companies that do hone in on that Canadian experience, but really focus on your pluses and your positives. You're bringing a lot of what you have learned to a company here in Canada. So hone in on that.
Amazing. And Wally, and this will be our last question of the webinar, asks about the best template / structure for a resume and cover letter. Is there one template or structure that works the best, or?
I don't think there is one, I can talk about mine. I got mine from, I think, Word. If you go on Microsoft Word, they have some templates there, but also play around because you don't want it to be the same as everyone else's. Just remember, you want to have a resume that is good in terms of your spacing. You've got a clear profile. You've got your jobs. You don't have too many words on there. You have highlighted your skills. So yeah, I think of it like that. But I use mine from Word, I think. I use that template there. So yeah, there's not a specific, no.
Great. Okay. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and the advice that you've given us throughout this webinar. Once again, we have a lot more of these webinars planned with TD in the future, so please keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars, which you can see in our newsletter and on CIC News. Jennifer, once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to our future webinars with TD.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.